Hi, and welcome to this special episode of Regenerative Fruit Growers. I'm your host, Luke, and today we're diving deep into the world of apricots, particularly those that thrive in cold climates. So I'm here at the residence of my dear friend and colleague, Bob Purvis. Bob is inarguably the foremost expert on apricot growing in the US and possibly even the world. So definitely stay tuned and grab that notebook because this is going to be a good one.
Luke, you finally made it.
We did. It's good to see you.
Why don't you come on in?
Let's get after it. What do you say?
Let's go outside and look at my trees.
All right, let's do it.
Brookcot is right here.
All right, so let's first kick it off with Brookcot, which I've been growing in Montana for several years now. And Bob's going to take it away and talk about Brookcot.
Okay, Brookcot right here is a selected seedling of Manchurian apricot that was found near Brooks, Alberta by the Brooks Research Station. And what's noteworthy about this apricot is that it's proven to be winter hardy in northern Minnesota between minus 45 and minus 50, specifically minus 48. And the tree, as you can see, has an upright growth habit. And the fruits are typically about 1.3, maybe 1.4 inches in diameter. Unfortunately, they're semi-cling oftentimes. They were not particularly clingstone this year. And you can see the tree is growing well. It's got big leaves this year. The tree is self-fruitful. It's got moderate vigor is grown here. And the fruits are okay for fresh eating, but they're not great. So the main strong point of this tree is both its winter hardiness and also the fact that it's a little bit later blooming than some of our other cold hardy apricots. The fruit is too soft and watery really to be processed for canning.
So if Brookcot isn't so great for fresh eating, and then it's also not so great for canning, what can you do with it?
Well, it's a good insurance apricot. It's had fruit this some years when our other apricots that are cold hardy have had no fruit because of frost. So that would be the main reason to grow it, I would say. The hardiness is probably the main thing that it's noteworthy for. So I would not grow this in a milder climate.
All right, this guy's going to shake this thing. All right, Bob. All right, there you go. They're
wow.
Just they're dropped like 10 or so. Pretty mushy, this one, so that one might be...
That's mushy. This one's no better.
They're all pretty mushy.
There's one here that might be... Oh yeah, this is better. It's slightly smaller, but we can use it.
All right, let's try this, Bob.
Okay.
It's got a really powerful smell, actually.
Mm-hmm. To me, the flavor is somewhat like Westcot or
Ooh, it actually, it's pretty good.
This is, I think, these are a couple of the best, probably the best year for Brookcots we've had in terms of flavor and size.
Oh yeah, you were selling this thing short.
A little bit.
Yeah, he was.
But I couldn't sell these at the Nampa Farmers Market against the other apricots I have.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You think it's maybe because it's a little bit further gone that it's developed some of those sugars, but
it's part of that. Also, the size is it can't compete with Hargrand or Rabata for size.
Yeah, that's fair. But for cold climate growers,
oh yeah, this is one
right up there with Westcot.
Yeah, for hardiness. So it's definitely got a place for people in the northern climates.
It's sweet. It's mellow. I didn't get that great of an indicator of the texture on that one because it was a little bit further along. But I could get really good aftertastes of kind of mango, a little bit melony. What do we have next?
Okay, Westcot is just 3 trees up the row here.
All right, great. Let's learn about Westcot. All right, so Westcot I also obtained from Bob back in 2020, and several of my Westcots have been going strong. It's pretty good flavor. It's not as hardy as Brookcot, but it's up there, and especially given its flavor. Tell us about everything you know about Westcot.
Okay, Westcot is a cross of Scout by McClure, and it was made sometime in the late 70s and introduced by Agriculture Canada in 1982. And I think the noteworthy things about Westcot are, yes, actually it is almost as hardy or maybe as hardy as Brookcot as seen in northern Minnesota. And Westcot is being grown commercially in southwest Minnesota by my friend John Fierst, who's had plenty of opportunity to observe the tree. It's a large tree. As you can see, this tree here is probably close to 20 feet tall. And as you can see, there's still a fair amount of fruit on the upper branches here. Fruits are orange. They're freestone. Tree is self-fruitful. It's got somewhat irregular growth habit. The fruits can not only be eaten fresh, but they can also be canned, which is rather noteworthy. And I'll have to say that in terms of drying either Westcot or Morden 604 or Debbie's Gold or Brookcot, they do not dry well. My experience in Minnesota was that they were very tart after they were dried. And it might be different here. We'll see when we actually try to dry them here later. This tree has become, or this cultivar has become very popular in Manitoba. It's very well suited to the milder parts of the prairie provinces. The Morden 604 is its sister. They both have the same parents. It's got a very typical Manchurian apricot shape. It's flat on the top, and then it kind of bulges out, and it kind of tapers to a point on the bottom, and it's wider than it is thick on dimensions.
All right, so you're putting Brookcot as being able to withstand somewhere between minus 45 and minus 50.
And Westcot likewise.
You'd put Westcot right up there with Brookcot.
I would. And so I would say that if Westcot is available, I would plant that in preference to Brookcot. And if it's not available, you could plant Brookcot. And in fact, I think Bailey Nurseries actually decided to propagate Brookcot after their horticulturist tasted all the hardy apricots in my yard in August of 2007.
And he thought Brookcot was
better, which I thought was
better.
very surprising.
I mean, so many different conditions, as you know, can influence flavor characteristics. All right, so I just grabbed this one. Most of them are up high, so was fortunate enough that this one was a little lower. This is Westcot, opening this thing up, nice and pretty orange, nice color to it. Mm-hmm. Smaller apricot, about 1.5 inches or probably less than 1.5 inches. Let's try it.
It has a smooth texture, I think.
Yeah, very smooth.
Good sugar content.
Good sugar, nice acidity on the aftertaste, huh?
Yeah. So this is why the authors of Ecological Fruit Production in the North spoke so highly of Westcot. That they said it was very good. And even here in our climate, it's performed pretty well.
All right, Bob, we've got arguably the hardiest of the prairie province apricots currently left in circulation. We've grown it successfully in Montana. Tell us what this is.
The apricot that you're alluding to there is Sunrise. I first learned about Sunrise from a book called Ecological Fruit Production in the North by Bart Hall-Beyer and Jean Richard, two Quebec orchardists. And I was intrigued by it. And I was able to actually buy a tree of it back in the early 1990s from, I believe it was Bear Creek Nursery in Washington. But first of all, let me give some background on the cultivar. Sunrise, according to their book there, had been bearing reliably in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which would be a very marginal USDA Zone 3A or more likely a 2B for over 30 years before 1983. And Lakeshore Tree Farms in Saskatoon introduced both Sunrise and also Prairie Gold in 1980. I began growing Sunrise in Selah, Washington, just north of Yakima in about 1992 or 93, and it became a pretty large tree and was fruiting when I dug it up and moved it to Bear Creek Nursery in Northport, Washington. So what's the background and characteristics of the apricot? Well, Sunrise and Prairie Gold, which we don't have access to that at the moment, they're crosses of Prunus armeniaca siberica, the Siberian apricot, by McClure. And the nature of the tree, as observed in Selah and here in Idaho, is that it has an upright to spreading growth habit. It spurs up pretty well. And the fruit, as I saw it there in Washington State, averages about maybe 1.25 inches, possibly 1.5 inches in diameter. And the fruit was somewhat acidic until it was fully ripe. And I vaguely recall that it's freestone, which is true of most apricots. I have a tree of it here in my orchard here in Idaho, but there's not a lot of cyanwood available on it yet. The tree is still trying to get used to being in a Zone 6B/7A climate when it's really better adapted to the prairie provinces. It's a continental apricot. I don't know how it would really do in a cold, wet climate. And there may be other apricots around that are as winter hardy I know that Dean Kreutzer in Canada has been working with seedlings of Westcot, and I think he's found one that was of better fruit quality than Westcot, which is saying quite a bit.
All right, so we are now in front of Morden 604, which, as you now know, is yet another Manchurian seedling selection. Tell us about Morden 604, Bob.
Okay, it's a cross of Scout by McClure, just like Westcott was. But this was actually introduced much earlier. This was introduced in 1946, and it's been around for a long time. The fruits are a little bit bigger than Westcott's, and I think they're a little bit sweeter. They're suitable for both fresh use and processing. And from all indications that I've seen here, Morden 604 is less vigorous than Westcott, and especially less vigorous than Debbie's Gold. The tree is self-fruitful. Fruits are yellowish-orange, just like the Westcott. Good flavor, probably slightly sweeter, and they bloom at the same time as Westcott does. I think that pretty well summarizes. You can see there's still a lot of fruits on the upper tree here.
And so what do you know this has survived down to?
For sure, to minus 41 in north of the Twin Cities. And I think we could safely say probably to minus 45, but I wouldn't want to bet below that.
Okay, so that's what we know it's survived.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little bit less hardy than Westcott, but it's also sweeter and a little bit bigger for the fruit.
So taste-wise, you would actually rank it higher on that list than
Just
Westcott.
a tiny bit than Westcott.
All right, so this guy just pulled this guy off this guy. So tell us about what you get when you bite into that, Bob.
Okay, well, as you can see, the flesh is a yellowish-orange color. The flesh is firm. This is a good example.
Strong smelling.
Yes, it definitely has an aroma to it.
Very aromatic.
Not too many apricots have a nice aroma like this. It can be canned or eaten fresh, which is a desirable attribute. It's freestone. It's moderately juicy, but not excessively so.
Close to 2 inches in size.
Yeah, they can get up to 2 inches according to the Canadians. And I think John Fierst has had apricots this big in southwest Minnesota with their good soils.
All right, so Morden 604. Let's bite into this thing.
Okay.
Good crunch.
Mm-hmm.
I like that acidity that you get after biting into the skin and just getting that like burst of flavor.
Something I want to point out here is, with respect to the fruit on the tree, this may be partly because of our location on some of the higher ground. There are still apricots fairly low down on the tree, which speaks pretty well about its ability to tolerate the frost regime we had this spring, which was unusually late.
It's a good apricot. It's definitely something that cold climate growers should grow.
Oh, yeah.
I would just rank order it slightly below Zard and Precious, but Zard and Precious aren't going to be as adapted to the cold as, say, something like Morden 604, which
That's
according
true.
to Bob's standards would be about 5 degrees more cold climate adapted than
That's about
Zard
right.
and Precious. Not quite up on the same level as Sunrise, Brookcot, and Westcott, but probably slightly below those.
I would say so, yes. Yeah. Well, speaking about the soil here, we have lots of potassium in the soil, but the calcium is to some extent tied up as free lime, calcium carbonate. And we have to use sulfur to break the bonds between the calcium and the carbonate. And it was only this year that we discovered that our soils were deficient in molybdenum, which is needed to make nitrogen better metabolized in a tree.
Now, we grow all of our apricots at this point on Manchurian rootstock. So I know that Manchurian rootstock can tolerate calcareous soils, which we have in Montana. Yes. So is this one on Manchurian as well?
Indeed it is. But
so
this one and Westcott are on Manchurian.
Okay.
Another comment here that in my years as an agricultural consultant in the Yakima Valley, I never once, and this is true also in Idaho, I have never once seen an apricot tree of any variety with lime-induced iron chlorosis, but yet you would see that on pear trees, on peach trees, and on apple trees growing in calcareous soils. This is also why...
You should say what calcareous soils are, by the way.
Yeah, they have a pH above 7, and they have a lot of calcium in the soil tied up as calcium carbonate, lime. So desert soils like these are a little more difficult to manage than the soils of the Midwest or even of places like in the Middle Atlantic states.
All right, so now we're on to Debbie's Gold. Bob, take it away.
Okay. Debbie's Gold was found as a chance Manchurian seedling by Aubin Nurseries in Carmen, Manitoba, about 1980. And The noteworthy things about the tree are it's the most vigorous of our cold hardy selections. It also blooms about a day later than Westcot and Morden 604, so that might be a margin of safety for people in frosty climates, which is probably most of us. And this tree has had some trunk damage, and I think the trunk damage is probably due to sun and possibly phosphorus or other deficiencies in the soil. And you can see the leaves. The fruits are rather similar in appearance to Westcot or Morden 604. And you can see the tree has a very upright growing habit coupled with its vigor. I tried to grow this on Prunus besseyi, the Hansen's bush cherry, and the graft was successful and the tree lived for a while, but there was a lot of suckering from the rootstock, which indicates that the tree was not totally compatible with Hansen's bush cherry. The fruits should be usable for not just fresh eating, but also for processing, and they are typically about 1.5 to 1.8 inches in diameter at best. And the other thing about this tree that I want to note is its cold hardiness. It's cold hardy to between minus 40 and minus 45, and I know for a fact it survived minus 41 in southwest Minnesota and has been grown commercially there like Westcot and Morden 604. So its cold hardiness plus its slightly later blooming character and the fruit quality would make it worth growing. It's on a Manchurian rootstock, like the other cold hardy apricots.
All right, so some of the issues that you're seeing with this individual apricot are not indicative of Debbie's Gold growing in general.
That's right. Yeah, it's just peculiar to my tree. But you can see that the tree is bouncing back with vigorous new growth, and you can also see these are the remnants of fruit spurs. I would say that as a whole, the cold hardy apricot spurs seem to be much shorter lived than those on some of our less cold hardy apricots.
All right, so of the 5 previous apricots that we've covered, Sunrise, Brookcot, Westcot, Morden 604, and now Debbie's Gold.
Yes.
These are all from the prairies, the Canadian prairies.
That's right.
We are doing one final one, which is Precious, which Bob actually hesitated at first in so including it on this list, partly because it's not considered a prairie hardy apricot, although you put it on the list, and we're going to see why. So let's go over to Precious, and we're going to discover why that's on the list.
Very well.
All right, so now we are at Precious. So tell us a little bit about Precious, Bob.
Okay. Precious was discovered sometime in the early to mid-1980s by a Canadian geologist named Fred Chubb, C-H-U-B-B. He guarded this apricot jealously because he thought it was so good. He found it at a ski resort in Ontario province, and the apricot clearly has some almond in its background because the kernels in it are sweet, unlike those in Brookcot, Debbie's Gold, Sunrise, Westcot, or Morden 604. And as you can see, the growth habit of this tree is spreading, and some of the noteworthy characteristics of the tree is it's later blooming. It blooms about the same time as Brookcot. It's well adapted to cold, humid climates like Quebec. It does pretty well in Quebec. It seems to be slightly less hardy than some of the other cold hardy apricots in dry climates like Minnesota or maybe Wyoming. The fruit has a nice flavor. It's really a little bit too soft here and watery, in my opinion, to be good for processing. It may or may not dry well. That's yet something to determine. But the kernels are sweet because of the almond ancestry. Fruit size is typically about 1.3 inches in diameter, which is not particularly impressive, but I think in colder climates, it can get somewhat larger. I know that Windmill Point Farms in Quebec spoke very highly of Precious, and I know it seems to have a good quality of escaping late frosts. So there are definitely places in the U.S. where Precious would be a good apricot, such as New Hampshire, Maine, or Vermont, or upstate New York, and possibly Massachusetts as well.
All right, Bob, and so what do you know about Precious in terms of how cold it's able to withstand?
It has withstood at least minus 43 in Quebec, I believe. So it's in the same category as Morden 604 and Debbie's Gold for hardiness. Maybe a little bit closer to minus 40 than minus 45 for its ultimate hardiness.
All right, so we just shook this tree and quite a few came down. These are not as far along as that Brookcot, huh?
That's true.
This is probably peak
ripening
period.
I would say right now it's probably would be a good time. As you can see, there's some on the ground, which means that we're probably a day or two past peak harvest, but no more than that.
But look at that gold, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're small, as you said, nothing to shout about.
And they're freestone.
But let's try them.
And they're juicy. Oh, this is a good flavored.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So good.
You see why this would be a good apricot for New England or Quebec?
Yeah, that's really good. It took me by surprise.
And as we said before, the
That's
kernel
up there with
inside
Zard for me.
That's
super high quality flavor.
This is, I think, the best precious I've had in a number of years. The texture's great. It's juicy. Good color inside and outside, too.
It's got that hint of the Montana mango that I was talking about earlier. That almost mango flavor to it. That kind of hint of acidity, but not quite that flavor that you get when you bite into like a dried Turkish apricot. But also, I'm biased because I like a little bit of acidity. I don't like biting into an apricot that's just totally sweet. I like that little kind of final explosion of acidity and other flavor notes that you get from the skin that lingers. I really like that. And that's what this has.
The skin, I just noticed, is a little bit on the thick side for the size of the apricot.
It's got a great texture, though.
Oh, yeah.
That skin provides really nice texture. So that's like kind of responsible for that crunch that you get.
Right.
This has a nice crunch, and the flesh it doesn't just totally crumble. Those cells don't just crumble as soon as you start chewing on them, which is responsible for that mushy taste texture that you get.
Yeah, so I think that we've seen Precious probably at its best, maybe because I did prune this tree, and besides the crop load is surprisingly is rather small this year. It had a huge crop the past couple of years, and it didn't grow much this year. It's growing much better. Yeah.
It's really good. Definitely worth growing.
Yes.
You had kind of almost undersold the flavor on this one, too.
Well, I didn't realize. This is the first I've really eaten any this spring or summer, so I didn't realize that they had improved so much in their flavor.
All right, we are in front of Zard. It's our bonus apricot. It is not a Manchurian seedling selection. It is an Iranian selection.
That's
Bob,
right.
Tell us about Zard.
Okay. Zard, as Luke mentioned, is an Iranian selection. It's a seedling of Zardalee, which is the Farsi word for yellow. And as you can see, the fruits are rather pale yellow with some blush on them. It's a white apricot. The flesh of this is a very pale yellow, and Zard has been used extensively in the Rutgers University breeding program as a pollen parent because it not only has the capability of blooming consistently later than most of our apricots here and there, but it also passes that quality on to the seedlings, which have Zard as their pollen parent. The only drawback to Zard is the seed inside is rather large, but the kernels of the seed taste just like almonds. They're sweet. And you can see it has an upright growth habit, and it can be very prolific most years, far more so than any of our other white apricots. I'd say the vigor is moderate. You can see that there's a limb there about maybe 12 to 13 feet high. This tree is on a Manchurian apricot rootstock, and it has withstood minus 41 in southwest Minnesota with no winter injury. So I believe it will be safe to probably plant it in zone 2B, but I don't know about zone 2A. I don't know if it would take minus 45 or not. The only apricot in the orchard that blooms later than this is Montrose, and Montrose also has a sweet kernel, and I don't know the exact town that Zard came from, but you can see these are pretty apricots, and they are excellent for drying and fresh eating. Probably being a white apricot, they're not the best for canning. They're probably a little too soft, maybe.
So Montrose, Precious, Zard, they all have the sweet edible kernels. Is that necessarily indicative that they do have almond as part of their genetic pedigree?
Most likely, and Harcot also has sweet kernels, and Chinese or Mormon has sweet kernels as well. So there's a handful of apricots that have that characteristic. Probably because there's an almond somewhere in the ancestry of these trees, because apricots normally have bitter kernels. B17 is what you find in apricot pits, and B17 is composed of two deadly poisons, formaldehyde and cyanide. And the regular body cells can tolerate that, but cancer cells succumb to it, so it can extend the lifetime of cancer patients quite a bit.
All right, this is Zard. Going to do a taste test on this one next. All right, so what would you say, Bob? About an inch and a half on this one, maybe close to
an inch and a half.
Yeah, so pretty decent sized. I've seen some that are actually even 2 inches, so I know they can get bigger. But
they can't attain good size when they're roped on the tree as you see them. Luke, could you show them the size of the pit in there, just for comparison's sake?
Pretty good sized pit.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna bite into this thing. I already know how it tastes, so it's not gonna totally be candid compared to what it was a few minutes ago when I tried it for the first time. It's so good. It's mellow at first, kind of sweet, and then you bite into that skin and it just bursts with the best acidity you've ever had. So it's kind of tangy. It's got just a flavor unlike any other apricot you've tried. So no exaggeration. I've tried a lot of apricots, not as many as this guy, but Bob, you're the apricot expert in terms of how many you've tried, in terms of many other things regarding apricots. Where does this rank on
flavor?
On flavor?
Well, I think among the white apricots, it's right up there with sugar pearls, which is a granddaughter or great-granddaughter of Zard.
But that tanginess, that flavor characteristic, you don't get that in other apricots.
Yeah, I would say it's probably among the top half dozen in the orchard for flavor. It can't beat robata, but I think it can beat any of the cold hardy apricots that we've talked about in terms of overall flavor.
I'd personally put it up there with Montana mango, which we discovered in Missoula, which in all likelihood, it's a Manchurian seedling that was planted either from chance or by settlers 100+ years ago. It's kind of similar mango flavor to that one.
Yes.
With a little bit of citrus that I think you get from that slightly acid skin.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think that's it. That's all we're able to try in terms of the apricots that Bob has available.
That's right.
If you guys like this video and you want us to do more of these, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button because it really helps us grow. And I think that's it, Bob.
Okay, well, it was a pleasure having a chance to talk about apricots with you, Luke. And
yeah, this is great.
Hope that those who watch this will find useful information that they can improve the odds of success with a wonderful fruit.
Hello, Purvis, my dear friend.
I've come to talk to you. Luke, good to see you.
You too, Bob.